Dear students, welcome back. In the previous session, we have discussed about the intrinsic muscles, that is lumbricals and interossei, and their role on MCP joints as well as the IP joints. Now in this session, we are going to discuss about the structure of the thumb, which includes the joints of the thumb. So what are the joints present in the thumb are carpo metacarpal joint and metacarpophalangeal joint, and the thumb is having only one interphalangeal joint, that is distal interphalangeal joints. These are the joints present in the structure of the thumb. Okay, now in this session, first we are going to discuss about the carpo metacarpal joint of the thumb. Yes, this is the only carpo-metacarpal joint which has a separate joint cavity, and the movements at this joint are therefore much more free than at any other corresponding joints. If you see the type of the joint, it is a saddle variety of synovial joint because the articular surfaces are concavo-convex. The articular surfaces are concavo-convex surfaces. Okay, if you see the articular surface, so the proximal articulating surface of the thumb is the distal surface of the trapezium, and distal articulating surface is the proximal surface of the base of the first metacarpal. Okay, the concavo-convex nature of the articular surface permits a wide range of movements, and it is having 2 degrees of freedom, that is flexion, extension, abduction and adduction. And all these movements, the net effect of this joint is a circumduction motion, commonly termed as opposition and reposition. Okay, so this is about the first carpo-metacarpal joint. If you see the ligaments of this joint, so we have discussed about the remaining carpo-metacarpal joints. Same like that, this joint is also having capsular ligament, so which surrounds the joint, okay, and lateral ligament and anterior ligament and the posterior ligament. So this capsular ligament surrounds the joint, which is generally thick but it is loose, and it is thickest in dorsally as well as the laterally. If you see the lateral ligament, in the lateral ligament it is like a broad band which strengthens the capsule laterally. If you see the anterior ligament, so which is also same as that of the remaining carpo-metacarpal joints, and the posterior ligament or oblique bands running downwards and medially. So these are all about the ligaments, the structures which give support to this carpo-metacarpal joint of the thumb. So what are the movements here? So I have already mentioned that flexion and extension, okay, and then abduction, adduction, and the opposition or reposition. So these are all the movements taking place here. In which plane all these movements are taking place is very, very important here. The flexion and extension of the thumb takes place in the plane of the palm, and abduction and adduction is taking place at the right angles to the plane of the palm. In opposition, the thumb crosses the palm and touches the other fingers. Okay, flexion is usually associated with medial rotation and extension, with lateral rotation of the joint. If you see the circumduction, it is a combination of different movements. Okay, so what are the muscles which helps for this movements are flexion. The flexion is done by flexor pollicis brevis and opponens pollicis. Extension is by abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis and extensor pollicis longus. If you see the abduction, so abduction takes place, abduction and adduction, right angles. Okay, so by abductor pollicis brevis, abductor pollicis longus. If you see the adduction, adduction takes place by adductor pollicis, opponents by opponens pollicis and flexor pollicis brevis muscles. Okay, so these are all the movements which are taking place in the carpo-metacarpal joints. So some of the studies done by Giancoli and associates, they have described these saddle-shaped surfaces, and they also found that some spherical portion located near the anterior tubercle, radial tubercle of the trapezium. Okay, the saddle-shaped portion of the trapezium is concave in sagittal plane. So if you say this becomes the sagittal plane here. Okay, so it appears like that. So in the sagittal plane only this abduction and adduction taking place. The sagittal plane is like that. So when this joint moves right angles to the palm, so it is taking place in sagittal plane, that is abduction and adduction. Okay, and they found convex surface in the frontal plane. So convex surface in the frontal plane like this. So here in this plane flexion and extension is taking place. Okay, the spherical portion is convex in all the directions, so the circumduction movement is taking place at this spherical shape. Okay, if you see the base of the first metacarpal, which is having a reciprocal shape to that of this trapezium. Okay, so all these movements are taking place in this manner because of its shapes of these bones. And then if you see the axis, we have seen the planes here. If you see the axis, flexion and extension of the joint occurs around somewhat oblique AP axis, whereas the abduction and adduction occurs around an oblique coronal axis. If you see the ranges of all these movements, so this joint is having an average of 53 degrees of flexion extension, 42 degrees of abduction adduction and 17 degrees of rotation. Okay, so these are the range of motions in the thumb, that is carpo-metacarpal joint of the thumb. Here the capsular ligament is relatively lax, and this capsule is reinforced by other ligaments. Okay, so these are all the studies they have found in the structure of carpo-metacarpal joint of the thumb. Okay, if you see this functional significance of this joint, it is having unique range and direction of motion at the first carpo-metacarpal joint, which produces opposition of the thumb. So opposition is taking place in a sequential order like abduction, flexion and adduction of the first metacarpal with simultaneous rotation. So how the opposition is taking place? One is abduction, flexion and then adduction and then some rotation. So all these movements causes the opposition movement. Okay, the functional significance of the carpo-metacarpal joint of the thumb and of the movement of opposition can be appreciated when one realizes that use of thumb against a fingers occurs in almost all forms of prehension. So prehension means the handling activities. Without thumb, we can't do this handling activities. Any grip is not possible without the thumb. Okay, so that thing we are going to discuss as a separate topic, that is prehension. So this is all about the structure of carpo metacarpal joints of the thumb. In the next session we are going to discuss about the MCP and IP joints of the thumb, as well as the extrinsic and intrinsic musculature of the thumb. Thank you.